Hey guys, David Tao with BarBend.com, and today we're talking about another important competition in the fitness calendar, and that's Mayhem Madness, with the CrossFit Games delayed, postponed, etc. We talked about that in a video last week, and no team, individual, or masters competition taking place this year's CrossFit Games. Rich Froning stepped up, and his crew started organizing their own team competition called Mayhem Madness that's set to kick off in early August. Okay, that's been delayed as well. Let's talk about that. But before we do, make sure you subscribe to BarBend on YouTube. That's the platform you're watching right now. Should be pretty easy to stay up to date on all things CrossFit, weightlifting, powerlifting, strongmen, news, training tips, advice, reviews, you name it, and also interviews with your favorite athletes. All right, the Mayhem Madness competition was scheduled to kick off on August 2nd in Cookeville, Tennessee, which has kind of become a real fitness destination. Rich Froning has lived there for a long time, and now Matt Fraser lives and trains there. Tia Claire Toomey lives and trains there. Sarah Sigmundsdottir lived there for a little while, and of course, the various members of Rich Froning's CrossFit Mayhem team that's won the affiliate cup at the CrossFit Games, honestly, more times than we can count at this point. Now, it was scheduled to kick off on August 2nd, but like a lot of things in sports during the COVID-19 pandemic, those dates are changing. It's also worth noting that we're just about a week removed from it being announced the CrossFit Games would be pushed back until mid-September at the earliest. They were originally scheduled to take place in late July at the Alliant Energy Center in Madison, Wisconsin. That was moved due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Then they were scheduled to take place at the same time at the CrossFit Ranch in Aromas, California. Then they were moved back to mid-August, and now mid-September, September 14th, has been thrown out as the earliest start date for this year's 2020 CrossFit Games. We talked about that in a video, which we'll link to down below and in a card right here. Now, the Mayhem Madness competition was Rich Froning and CrossFit Mayhem team's way of saying, hey, we know there's not a team competition at this year's CrossFit Games, so we're going to step up to the plate and we're going to put on a team competition so that the fittest teams in the world can come together, throw down, and see who's really the best. And it's funny, we were actually going to record an update video and post an update article on the Mayhem Madness competition, and then literally while we were editing that, it came out that the dates had been changed. It had been postponed, just like pretty much everything else in the strength sports world during the COVID-19 pandemic. But don't take my word from it. Here's what the CrossFit Mayhem team had to say. Travel bans have eliminated our ability to host the top international teams who've legitimately qualified for the competition. We are evaluating new target dates and the necessary precautionary measures needed to prevent the spread of COVID-19. We will reevaluate the ban on international travel on August 1st. We will announce our intentions to the public by August 3rd. The new target date for Mayhem Madness will be August 23rd to the 30th. This postponement comes as a great disappointment to us, and we appreciate your understanding. So while there were plans originally in place to keep the scope of the competition a bit smaller, limited spectators, some people had even speculated that there would be no spectators, the date movement is pretty significant because COVID-19 cases have begun to spike again in basically most states within the United States. A lot of countries aren't accepting American entrants and tourists unless under special circumstances, and a lot of countries won't let their athletes travel to the United States for a competition like this. So it makes a lot of sense that, first off, Mayhem Madness is being pushed back simply because the top competitors won't all be able to be in Cookeville for it. So is that really testing the fittest teams if the fittest people aren't able to attend? Will the situation have changed by early August when Mayhem has announced they're going to kind of make a public decision on this, or at least announce new target dates? We don't know. There's a lot that's still up in the air regarding exactly how cases in the United States will track, if they'll go up, if they'll go down, specifically if they'll go up or down in Tennessee and the part of Tennessee that Cookeville is in. Let's talk a little bit about what the schedule was supposed to be like for the Mayhem Madness competition, which could give us a little bit of indication as to what it might still look like when and if it's actually able to take place. From August 2nd to 3rd, 12 teams would be competing. On August 4th, there'd be a rest day and the teams would be cut to 8. August 5th through the 6th, 8 teams would compete. August 7th, a rest day, teams cut to 4. And August 8th through 9th, the final 4 teams would compete to determine champions. The top ranking team at the end of the day on August 9th would be the inaugural Mayhem Madness champions. Now, that's a 2 on, 1 off, 2 competition days one rest day cadence that sounds pretty interesting, and I think makes a lot of sense, especially with a smaller field and with a variety of events that Mayhem Madness was proposing. It does give a rest day in the middle of 2 competition days for athletes to rest and recuperate. It's also worth noting, this is a pretty long team competition. This is a full week-long team competition, and that's actually a little bit longer than we're used to seeing the team competition held, at least the duration it's held over, at the CrossFit Games. So these extra rest days added in there, the cadence of 2 on, 1 off, was pretty interesting, and certainly comes from a place of experience, as the CrossFit Mayhem team is very familiar with high-level team competition and the needs, wants, and desires of athletes competing in those types of events. Now let's talk about the teams that are scheduled to compete in Mayhem Madness. It's worth noting, and I do want to say, that with the pushback of the dates, it hasn't been announced that there have been any changes in the roster of scheduled teams. So I'm going to list off the 12 teams currently scheduled to compete in Mayhem Madness whenever that takes place. Most likely looking like late August or beyond at this point. Team Krypton, P10 Performance Misfit, Team Misfit, the Canadians, Team Grown Strong, the Program, Team Meat Squad, Terranus Lifetree, Star Strength Black, the Athlete Program, Team CrossFit Mayhem, and Mayhem Independence. And I actually read that in the draft order determined by the online qualifier. The draft order, what does that mean? Teams will actually get to select events they want to see held at the competition from a pool according to that draft order. So where the teams stand after that online qualifier is important, because they get more picks and they get first picks or earlier picks as far as what types of events they want to see, so they can better play to their strengths. You'll notice that I actually listed the 2 teams from CrossFit Mayhem itself last. Because they're involved in the programming of the events, CrossFit Mayhem has said they don't get draft picks, so they don't get that additional say in what's actually programmed during the course of this competition. It's also worth noting that the cadence of events, the number of events, the types of events, the actual length of the competition, is it going to be a full week, the cadence of the 2 on, 1 off competition and rest days, this could all change based on the new scheduling for the event and for the competition. For example, if there's a smaller field of teams that's actually able to make it to Cookeville, that could change the cadence. Having spectators or no spectators could change where the events are held, what kind of implements can be used, and what kind of outdoor elements can be used for, like swimming or running or biking or something like that. So it is worth noting that this is Mayhem Madness as it was scheduled to take place in early August. Mayhem Madness as it might take place in late August or beyond, it could look different as far as events go, as far as teams participating go. It's just worth noting there's a lot of things up in the air right now. And it's understandable that Mayhem would be leaving their options open so that they could potentially put on the best and safest competition possible. They've mentioned that they are going to have protocols in place to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. We don't know exactly what those are going to look like just yet. They've released some more information in podcast updates and on social media, but a lot of those specifics I'm sure will be announced a lot closer to the event. And we'll know more on August 3rd. That's the date they've given themselves to make a public announcement regarding when Mayhem Madness is ultimately scheduled to take place. And we should assume what that event might look like if it's different than what they've already announced. Also, fun fact, the 2 Mayhem teams, if they were to win the event, would not be eligible for prizes. So the prizes would go to the next highest placing teams. That's kind of nice. It's a little weird to host a competition where people competing in the competition are actively involved in the organization of the event, in the programming of the workouts, but it is cool to see CrossFit Mayhem and Rich Froning's team take steps to kind of take their biases out of it, or at least put themselves at a slight disadvantage, or I guess at least not be able to use that to their advantage so much heading into the competition. Is it perfect? No, none of this is perfect, but they're doing their best to put on a competition to also let themselves compete. Remember, they're some of the fittest athletes and fittest teams in the world, while making the field competitive, or as competitive as possible. In my opinion, these steps are pretty commendable, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them take even more steps to give themselves a little bit of a handicap, or at least prevent them from getting advantages in these workouts and in these competitions. Let's also talk a little bit about the types of events that Mayhem has currently scheduled out for the Mayhem Madness competition. They've actually released a lot of this information on their website, but I thought this was kind of an interesting way to approach team competition. And here it is. There are individual relays, 4-person events, same gender pairs, mixed gender pairs, and swim events. It's also worth noting that they have said there will be fan votes to help determine some events that are not picked via the workout draft. So that's a cool way for you to get involved at home if the competition takes place. It's also worth noting Rich Froning and his team are no strangers to putting on events, and they do know something about organization here. They have some experience even from earlier this year with the 2020 CrossFit Mayhem Classic. I actually talked to Rich about some of the challenges in programming that before the competition actually took place. And if you listen to the BarBend podcast, which I'll link to in a card right here, where I talked to Rich Froning about that, it's really interesting to hear how his brain works and how his mind works, not just as an athlete, but as an organizer and a business person. So would definitely recommend taking a listen there. And it's Rich Froning. What have you got to lose? All right, that's the rundown on the details of the Mayhem Madness competition as we know them. We'll link to some more resources below here, including a podcast that Mayhem released with additional details about the competition. But as far as the exact dates this will take place on, who will be able to attend, which travel restrictions will be in place by then, we'll have to wait and see. Until then, I'm David Tao with BarBend.com. Thanks for tuning in.